Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Philadelphia Flyers recently replaced Chuck Fletcher with Daniel Briere, and all indications are Briere's probably going to get to keep the job. He's interim GM right now. They may ask around, talk to some guys, and then say, you know what, Briere gets the job. And Briere seems to be anxious to do it, and he's talked openly about needing a rebuild. Now, whether or not this is a full teardown, and this is a question that gets asked too, full teardown versus not a full teardown. And I don't think Philadelphia needs a full teardown. I don't think it's that bad. It may feel that bad if you're a Flyers fan. I understand. I'm a Canuck fan. I understand that feeling. But it may not be that bad. And it may be a matter of the health of a few players. It may be a matter of finding some cap space and then building up the prospect pool. The prospect pool is a little shallow in terms of top end talent, right? So that's really where things are kind of questionable with Philadelphia. They have been mortgaging the future for the present, and it's a present that wasn't necessarily good enough to mortgage for, is a good way of putting it, right? So for the Flyers currently, just some numbers to throw out there first. Their power play is the worst in the league at 14.9%. Their penalty kills 26th at 74.5%. They're scoring 2.55 goals per game. They're allowing 3.3. These are all numbers you would expect for a team that's already in a rebuild. But the Flyers aren't. And so now they have to pivot, right? And every time I say the word pivot, I see that scene from Friends. It is a thing that does happen. It is one of the few things that will make me laugh every time. But at any rate, Couturier stands out. So Sean Couturier hasn't played this year, and he only played 29 games last season. And at this point, you have to be concerned about the state of his career, what the future is going to look like. His cap hit is 7.75 million until the year 2030. So he may be one of those players that ends up on LTIR. He may end up staying there if the return doesn't go well. I hope it does. Sean Couturier, one of the best two-way centers in the game, and the fact that he's only played 29 games in the last almost now two full seasons is a big part of the reason why it's been such a struggle for Philadelphia. I think it's made that much of a difference. I made the argument when Couturier was healthy and playing well that I thought he was their most valuable player. He was their best forward, and that he was one of the best two-way forwards in the league. So that's really some big shoes for somebody to try to fill, and they don't really have anybody that can play that role currently. You have a Cam Atkinson. He hasn't played this year either. 5.875 million. So that's $13.5 million worth of their cap that hasn't played this season, and he's signed until 2025. Atkinson, I haven't seen anything on any kind of a return with him either. So yeah, there's a lot of question marks there. Then you've got Provorov. Now, Provorov is an interesting one because in 67 games this year, he has 4 goals, 18 assists, 22 points. Provorov's status as an elite defenseman, not really there. Provorov's had some good seasons, but again, if you ask around, the answer you're probably going to get is he hasn't been the same since Niskanen retired. And at 6.75 million until 2025, I think if Kevin Hayes, we're going to get to Kevin Hayes, if Daniel Briere does his homework in the offseason, and if he calls around a bit, he might find a taker for Provorov at that cap hit. So one thing with this year's free agent pool not looking like it's going to be as deep as some of the others, that definitely would lend itself to a guy like Provorov maybe being a more attractive option, where you look and you say, you know what, it's a $6.75 million cap hit. My team can absorb that. And I'd rather sign him than the options on the free agent market who might cost me 7 or 8, right? Because the cap hits are going to keep going up. So Provorov could get moved in the offseason, and that would create some cap space. And he's still young enough that you can look at that cap hit and say that's fine. Ristolainen, 5.1 million until 2027. He has 2 goals and 12 assists this year in 60 games. He's picked it up after a really abysmal start to the season, but still that contract doesn't look great. I don't know if it's tradable. I don't know if it's tradable without throwing in future assets, and Briere's not going to want to throw in future assets to move that contract. I just don't see it happening. And then you got Sanheim. Sanheim's extension hasn't kicked in yet. Yeah, $6.25 million until 2031. So that's quite the contract right there. 66 games played, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points for Sanheim. He's had some. I think he's again a player who had a rough start to the season. I think he's been better over the last, I'll say 20, 25 games. But again, that's a lot of money. This is a blue line that between Provorov, Ristolainen, and Sanheim is costing them about $18 million. Yeah, I hope you were sitting down before I threw that number out. At any rate, it's a lot of money, and for a blue line that's been largely mediocre. We've talked about Carter Hart for years, and one thing I've said for years about Carter Hart is he plays really well. The blue line in front of him really doesn't, and I don't know that that's really gotten better this year. Although I will say this, John Tortorella's put in some systems here that have, I think, helped keep that goals against average from ballooning up to near 4. I think that without Tortorella, if they hadn't hired him, if they'd hired, say, a younger coach, on his first job, I think we'd be looking at a team that's allowing probably an extra, at least half a goal against per game. Then you got Kevin Hayes, $7.142 million till 2026. In 66 games, 17 goals, 32 assists, 49 points. That's a contract that I think Briere would want to move. I don't know how many takers you'd have for that, but again, maybe with the shallow market for free agents, maybe. But again, I'm trying to be as rosy as I can in this. But these are contracts that the ones in black are the ones that I think could be on the move this summer. Or in the case of Couturier and Atkinson, we may just see them end up on LTIR. Now, Couturier is trying to come back. It's been a real struggle for him, and I hope he does. Because if he can come back and play and be healthy, that goes a long way to fixing some of the problems Philadelphia's had this year and last season. This is a big, really a big spot for somebody to try to fill, and I again don't think there's anybody in the organization who can. Then the ones in red, you have the ones that I think you can keep. Carter Hart's name immediately came up. As soon as Briere said, okay, well, rebuild, immediately people went, so where's Carter Hart going to go? Okay, Carter Hart's 24. So you don't have to trade Carter Hart. It's the same as Demko in Vancouver. It's similar to the John Gibson question in Anaheim. You don't need to move these goaltenders. They're still in their prime. Goaltenders can play well into their 30s. You don't have to move Hart. But his cap hit's $3.979 million, so almost $4 million until 2024, and he's a restricted free agent in 2024. In the event that Daniel Briere is named, okay, you're the full-time GM. They shake hands on it, big press conference. If after that Briere gets on the phone and says, hey, so I'm looking at maybe moving Carter Hart, there are going to be some general managers who pick up the phone and listen. And if he goes out publicly and says Hart's on the market, he will get some calls. Carter Hart's a very good goaltender. The one thing with Hart is I think there was probably too much hype for him when he came into the league. And now I think there's more criticism for Hart than he probably deserves from people. So he's probably, the truth is somewhere in between. He's probably not, going to be a Vezina winner and one of the best top 5 goalies in the league. But he can be one of the top 15 goalies in the league, and I think he can be consistently good. And so I think there's going to be a market for him. And again, he's young. So there's going to be teams that would definitely make that phone call. And at about $4 million, for a team like, let's say, Carolina, right, who has Anderson, Ronta, they're both on expiring deals. You got Kochetkov coming up. Hey, you had Carter Hart, you let Ronta and Anderson go, and you got Hart and Kochetkov, your goaltending set for a while. Because again, he's a restricted free agent when his contract expires. So just using Carolina as an example. Konechny, $5.5 million till 2025 and 52 games this year, 27 goals, 27 assists, 54 points. Konechny's a star player. I don't think he goes anywhere. I think he sticks around. Now, Farabee, I've got him on the red marker because I think he stays. $5 million until 2028, but it's been a rough year for Farabee. 67 games, 9 goals, 18 assists, 27 points. Nowhere near the breakthrough I'd expected from him, and it feels like he's largely invisible in certain games this year for Philly, and that's not optimal, again, when you're paying a guy that amount of money. So for Farabee, if I was going to allow for maybe he gets moved, maybe not, that's where I'd put him, but he's signed through 2028. He's still young. He could still bounce back. So if they decide to keep him, I don't think that hurts them on any level. Then you got Lawton, $3 million till 2026 in 63 games, 15 goals, 21 assists, 36 points. Is Lawton perfect? No. Does he have a lot of heart? Absolutely. And therefore, the $3 million cap hit, I think, is something they can live with. I don't know that Lawton necessarily ends up on the market. And then you got Owen Tippett. Owen Tippett's been one of those bright spots for Philadelphia this year. He has a $1.5 million cap hit until 2024 when he's a restricted free agent as well. In 62 games, 18 goals, 16 assists, 34 points. With the right players around Tippett, with the right coaching, and just with the development of this team when they start building up, Tippett could be a 30-goal scorer. Absolutely. And I think he's reached a level in Philadelphia he wasn't going to reach in Florida. So him going to Philadelphia was the best thing for him. I don't see him getting moved. And then you have D'Angelo, which I'm sure this is going to divide people. But at the $5 million cap hit for one more year beyond this one, so till 2024, in 60 games, 10 goals, 24 assists, 34 points. Is he great defensively? No. Are there going to be times where he gets sat out by Tortorella? Yeah. Yeah. If Tortorella is still coach next year and D'Angelo comes back, would that probably continue? Probably. But because the team's going into a rebuild, you might be better off to keep D'Angelo through the summer, have him on the team next year, and then rent him out at the deadline. You might get a better return for him at the deadline than you would this summer. And so I don't think D'Angelo goes anywhere this summer, and I don't think that contract's rough for them. Now, cap space for next year is already sketchy. They only have $7,166,476. But there's an asterisk with this because you have Ellis that's unlikely to play again. I'm pretty sure cap friendly doesn't account for LTIR when it comes to the cap space for the following years. And so they're going to have more than that. Plus, if Couturier or Atkinson ended up being on LTIR next year as well, they could end up with a decent amount of space. But you can weaponize that space in the same manner as Detroit just did, in the same manner that the Ducks can, or the Arizona Coyotes can, right? So you can do that. Now this year's draft, they don't have a lot of extra picks. They have their own they have their own first round pick. They have 2/3. I don't think it's their third either. I meant to write that down. I'm pretty sure they don't have their own third. They don't have a second round pick. They have 2 4th-round picks, a 5th, 2 6ths, and a 7th. Then in 2024, it's 2 firsts. They still don't have a second. They have a third, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th. 2025, they have all 7 of their own picks. So this is a team that has not started accumulating picks because they had a GM that wasn't building for the future, right? This was considered to be a team that was close. Well, they're close. We're close. Why would we want to do that? We're close. It can be really frustrating hearing that year after year after year from a general manager of, yeah, we missed the playoffs, but we think we're close. And you want to just go up and you're not close. There's nothing close about this. You're not close. So, because it's the same, and then it's like, we think we're going to bring back the same team because we're close. You're not close. Stop saying that. Now, their upcoming list of prospects, there's guys here who may end up being regulars, and there's others I didn't put on the board either because it gets into this whole, who's going to be that guy. You have Elliot Desnoyers, who's been called up, played a few games this year. Bobby Brink, who's been sidelined with injuries this season, but he was the 34th pick in 2019. And if he's able to be 100% healthy and get into their lineup and play regularly, Brink could be a good player. You have Zayd Wisdom, Samu Tuamala. Cutter Gauthier is considered a pretty top-notch prospect, and Gauthier could end up being a really solid player for Philadelphia soon. And then Emile Andre, defenseman. And I believe he was at the World Juniors, right? And I was impressed with Andre at that. So that's one thing to look at. Outside of Gauthier and Andre, though, I don't know how many of these players are going to be, say stars or, that project to be really, players that can get this team back to, say, the playoffs, right? So they have the number 5 spot right now in the draft lottery standings. And they're right close with Montreal. It's an 8.5% chance they have right now that they will draft Connor Bedard. Now, if they win the draft lottery, I expect to see Daniel Briere doing backflips because that would really go a long way to fixing some of this team's problems as well. If you had the two-headed monster of Bedard coming in on an entry-level contract, right, $925,000 a year, that's a pretty good deal for a kid coming in who NHL players have said could have scored 30 goals this year in the National Hockey League. And if Couturier could come back and be healthy in October, right? So you'd have those two in your top 6. That would go a long way to turning things around. And then maybe instead of doing the full rebuild, maybe then you could, get picks for this year And you might be able to, before the draft, move players and get extra draft picks, or pick up draft picks for next year during the off season and during the start of next season and all that fun stuff, right? So they may very well be able to load up for this year's draft and next year's, while adding Bedard if they won the draft lottery. And even then, at fifth in the draft, that's still a pretty good standing. And if they end, even if, let's say they lose both, let's say that the teams behind them jump ahead of them and end up drafting seventh, this year's draft is considered really, really strong. So Philadelphia is going to get a useful player if they stay in that range. And it is not at 7. You're not going to get a guy who's going to do what Bedard will do for you. But hey, right? If they draft second, in all likelihood, they'll get Fantilli. Fantilli has just lit the world on fire in the NCAA this year. And so, yeah, this is an important offseason, and I think that I can't overstate that for Philadelphia fans. I will say that the optimism now with the change at the top of the organization is there. And I think there's some trust in Briere making the right moves. I wanted to keep this pretty simple. I wanted to keep this pretty basic. I didn't want to get into the weeds of absolutely everybody on the roster. And so let me know which contract you think is tradable. Which player do you think, and I'm thinking more along the lines of the guys in black, but if you think one of the contracts in red might be the one to move, let me know why and what you think the path forward should be and how many players you keep around, or do you do the full teardown and just say, no, you do a Chicago. We're just going to move everybody and we're going to just tear everything down. I don't think they need to. I don't think the need is there for that. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.